Hello, everyone. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Sorry, sometimes the AirPods do not cooperate. Thank you. How is everybody? That good, huh? Gabriella, where are you from?
I'm originally from Colorado, and now I live in the East Bay.
All right. We haven't met, right?
I
You
don't
look
think so.
familiar.
I'm at work, so sorry for the creepy background.
Oh, that's okay. This is the only room I get decent Wi-Fi, and at this hour, every single time we do this call, it is so bright, and I don't have any good curtains to cover it up, so
Oh, for
it's like
you. You gotta
staring
wear
in the
that hat.
sun.
Hi guys.
Well, also I have a COVID cut, so
Oh, I'm
just
sorry.
leave it as it is. Well, thanks for joining me,
Ryan?
Sophie. Hi.
I have my computer and then I'm on this also, so I'll be sharing
Okay.
with others.
Cool. Is this your first Zoom, Sophie? Or no?
I'm so zoomed out.
You're zoomed out.
Like Zoom every day, all day,
Yeah.
every day. Hi, Gabriella.
Hello.
How you doing? I'm so pumped you're here.
Yeah, I'm at work, so I'm wearing all my PPE.
Yeah.
What's work, Gabriella?
I work at Cal. I'm a postdoc.
Okay.
I study fruit flies, fruit fly brains.
Okay. I study them too when they're on my counter, but
Oh yeah.
a little different.
You're just gleeful that they're on there. They're not flying around.
Yeah. Oh, and I see my wife and my kid are in the other room joining.
Hi, Ryan. Hi, Sophie.
Hi. Oh my God, there's a tiny arm on you.
Say hi.
Oh my God. In the flesh. So sweet.
Just turned 1 this past weekend.
Wow.
Cool. We've got a decent amount of people on here. 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, like 20 or so. So yeah, I actually just got back from a ride. I wanted to like prep myself a little bit more, but it's so beautiful, and the air has been so horrible for the past week. I don't know who all is from the Bay Area in this, or if you're from anywhere else that fires have affected. It's been a rough past week for a lot of people. Or at least here in the Bay Area, the last 2 days have been sunny and pretty nice out air quality wise. So I've been riding a lot. Dana, how are you doing? Good. I'm sure Dana's been riding. So I guess we'll just kind of get started here. I'm Ryan. Hello. Each time we do this, I see some new faces and new names. I'm going to go ahead and ask everybody, if you haven't already, to mute your mic for this kind of while I'm talking, while Sophie's talking, and then we'll open it up to Q&As towards the end. And during this, if you want, during the presentation or whatever, I hate calling it a presentation, but during the talk, if you have any questions that you don't want to forget, just throw them in the text option, the chat option, and either I'll pick those up or Sophie will pick those up, or we'll attack them as they come. So again, yeah, I'm Ryan. I work for Rapha. Worked for Rapha for 6 years now. I do marketing, and I run the Rapha Cycling Club here in San Francisco. Part of my job is to just make sure members have a good membership and get value out of their membership. And we've been working with Achieve for longer than, about as long as I've worked at Rapha, maybe longer before me. I'm an Achieve client, been an Achieve client for 5 years or so. My wife has been an Achieve client in the past. I can't say enough great things about Dana. Coach Dana's on this call too. Sophie's given in-person talks before the pandemic in Rapha that have been really well received. focusing on recovery and nutrition and all that kind of stuff. So we've been doing a series of Coaches Corners with Achieve, and we've had Coach Dana was first, we had Coach Ryan, who focused a little bit more on, I can't remember what Ryan did a little bit on a workout execution, and then we had Coach Jackson about a month ago, and Coach Sofi is the final coach in that sequence. And then hopefully we'll restart it again. But we had a lot of questions about nutrition over the past 3 Coaches Corners, and it's always a hot topic. So nobody better than Coach Sofi, who is a nutritionist and this is what she does in addition to being a coach. And she has a lot of great advice, and she's got a great presentation to share with you guys. Again, not a presentation, talk, whatever you want to call it. And I'll let her talk about how she's going to break it down. But we'll open it up for Q&As at least at the end. So like I said, save your Q&As or throw them in the chat option, and I'll kick it over to you, Sofi.
Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Coach Sofi. Thanks so much, Ryan and Rapha, for hosting. I'm so glad you all could join. And on behalf of Achieve Coaching, I'm here with y'all. Like Ryan said, I'm a cycling coach, but I'm also a sports nutritionist. So I've heard a few questions already come in. And so today what I wanted to talk about was fueling for your rides, and how you can do that in a way that's really going to support your goals. So I actually have I'm going to share my screen with you all, and I'm going to go through a presentation. And then at the end, I'm going to do a Q&A. So if you have questions that pop up during, feel free to just put them in the chat. That way you won't forget. So let's get started. Let's see here. Okay. Okay.
I didn't really mention Sofi, but you're a badass cyclist as well, too.
Oh, yeah.
I kind of talk about that. That's
yes.
a picture of you winning in the photo that was shared for promoting this.
Yes. So I was Cat 1 bike racer for many years. Forgot about that. I worked with a Women's World Tour team for about 6 years, Team Tibco. And I've done sports nutrition now and coaching, but a lot in the cycling industry. And yes, I love bike racing and really all aspects of cycling. So let me see. That's a little bit about me. Let me see if I can do this. Okay. So I can hit present. All right, can everyone see that? Okay. Yeah, cool.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, the first thing I want to go through, which is tied into how to fuel for your rides, is the top 3 mistakes for on the bike nutrition. So the first thing that is really, I think, neglected is hydration. Number 2, under eating. And number 3, I would say not considering the demands and goals of the ride you're doing. So let's go through those. Number 1, poor hydration. So optimal fluid intake and electrolyte balance during exercise will maximize athletic potential, boost your endurance, improve your cardiovascular efficiency, delay fatigue, reduce cramping, and lead to increased power. So obviously it's a really important thing to think about. We typically lose between 1 to 2 liters of fluids or body water per hour of intense exercise. And that can be anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams or 2 grams of salt. So that's quite a bit, and that's per hour. Now think about if you're drinking a 1 liter bottle, how many of those are you having realistically during your rides? Here's some facts about hydration. So if you feel thirsty, typically that would indicate you're about 2% below optimal body water, which results in up to an 11% drop in peak power output. So again, this is significant power loss that is easily handled with proper hydration. At 3% body water loss, you have a drop in your VO2 max at about 5%. So yeah, I guess I don't need to keep reiterating. Lastly, most athletes, we can't orally replace the amount of fluids lost during exercise. So It's just not possible. So we need to both start the ride fully hydrated, and then we actually have to continue to consciously rehydrate after the ride for anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. If you're out going and it's really hot out, or you're at altitude, or you're doing a really hard effort, you might want to consider pre-hydrating. So that's drinking something pretty salty the night prior and the morning of the event. You can do this naturally with like miso soup, like 8 ounces miso soup, veggie broth, or Osmo Preload is a great choice. Also, I'm the nutritionist for Osmo, so just, I'm going to probably promote their stuff, but I also think it's good. So anyway. Okay, what's the primary objective of hydration? Really, it's to efficiently replenish body water and salt losses to keep the body cool and functioning optimally. We're losing so much water when we're exercising, and we're producing a ton of heat. So we need to offload that heat. And the way we do that is by moving blood to the skin, where then it can cool off. And if your blood needs to move to the skin to cool off, we need our blood to be very, not viscous, but really liquidy. So plain water alone typically does not sufficiently replenish body water losses while exercising, unless the exercise is very low intensity with minimal sweating. So if you're in a recovery spin, chill, you could probably be just fine with plain water. I like to think of or call hydrating functional hydration. So when I talk about functional hydration, that means you're including salts and electrolytes in your water to optimize fluid absorption, because salt is a really helpful transporter and carrier of fluid from the gut into the bloodstream. So electrolytes, maybe a show of hands. Who here's ever gotten a cramp? Well, a lot of you don't have your cameras on. It's because you're in your PJs. Anyone who's gotten a cramp on the bike? I think probably most people have at some point cramped on the bike. Oftentimes that is a sign of electrolyte depletion, and you're just not, things are not firing correctly. So electrolytes are minerals that regulate body fluids. They maintain muscle and nerve function, and they're really essential to offset the time to dehydration. So if you are low on electrolytes, you might experience muscle cramps, fatigue, dizziness, nausea. Sodium, like I said, is heavily lost in sweat. It's the number one. It makes up about 90% of the electrolytes we lose is really just sodium. Potassium, magnesium, calcium, chlorine, and phosphate. And you'll see here sort of the different roles that each of these minerals aids in, right? So muscle contraction, pH, etc. Here's something that I think maybe not a ton of people are aware of. So if you are just drinking Noon, for example, all day, every day, I would not say that's an ideal rehydration product. I think it works for some instances. The reason being, Noon is high in salt, that's great, but it does not have any sugar. And I really do think the combination of, well, the science shows that the combination of glucose and sodium together really accelerate water absorption and fluid absorption in the body. So salt, like I said, makes up 90% of electrolytes lost in sweat, and allows fluid to move freely through the body. And it's essential to nearly every nerve function we have. Sugar, on the other hand, it's a really excellent co-transporter of water across the small intestine and into the body where your body needs it to stay cool. So sugar is considered, or glucose is a co-transporter. So when it's combined with salt, it can carry even more water into the body versus just sloshing around sitting in your belly. So if you've ever had slosh where you just sort of feel the water swishing around in your belly, that's typically because there's not enough salt and sugar to carry that water out of the gut and into the bloodstream. So here's a couple of tips for easy versus short rides when it comes to hydration. So if you're doing like an easy, shorter ride and it's low temperatures outside, plain water could work. Or what I might suggest is like a no or low sugar electrolyte drink. That's if you're trying to be conscientious of calorie consumption and limiting sugar intake. If you're not sweating a ton, you probably don't need the functional hydration model. You could probably work off just water or water with a pinch of salt in it or something like Noon. If you, however, are doing a harder ride or a hot ride, or you're at altitude, or for women, if you're in the high hormone phase of your cycle, then you for sure want to functionally hydrate with sodium and glucose. So you want to drink a low carbohydrate electrolyte drink mix. So that's Scratch makes a great low carb drink mix. Osmo makes a great low carb drink mix. Something like Gatorade would be terrible because it's too high in carbohydrate. So if there's too much sugar or salt, it's going to have a hard time leaving your gut and going into the bloodstream. If you're too little of salt and sugar, it will probably stay in your tummy as well because it doesn't have carriers to transport it across the small intestine. So when it comes to quantity, you know, this is something you have to measure for yourself because it really does depend on ride intensity and the heat and humidity, factors like that. General guideline for hydration, anywhere, like I said, there's so many factors that come into play here, but anywhere from 20 to 48 ounces per hour, or if you're going to functionally hydrate with a solid electrolyte drink, 0.15 ounces per pound of body weight per hour. So feel free to screenshot that or just write it down. Okay, so getting enough, you know, I would say hydration is probably the biggest factor of performance. If you're not hydrated, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. Like, there's not much you can do from that point. I would say it's significantly more important than even carbohydrate depletion. So I would say, you know, 1 to 2 bottles of electrolyte fluids per hour typically. Sip small amounts frequently. You don't want to just like chug a bottle and then that's not going to help with the absorption process. You want to do a little bit at a time. So my sort of protocol is quarter bottle every 15 minutes or so. Another thing you can do, weigh yourself before and after the ride. That gives you an idea of how much water you've lost. So typically about 1 kilogram of weight loss equals 1 liter of fluid loss. So you have to kind of think about too, if you pee, there's some water you're losing there that you're not accounting for in the weighing process. But generally speaking, you know, if you come back from the ride and you're 2 kilograms lighter, you've probably lost a significant amount of water. So you probably lost 2 liters of water and maybe you drank 2 liters. So really you lost 4 liters of water. Okay, so that can help guide your choices. Mistake number 2, under eating. Very common. Anyone ever bonked? That actually still happens to me, which is super embarrassing. Like I've been riding my bike for so long and this is what I do for a living. And like, I think in the last 2 months, I totally bonked. I mean, it's just wild. I had to drink a Fanta and it saved me. Anyway, under eating. So ride duration and intensity will determine caloric demands of the effort. So has anyone here, there's not too many of you on camera, but has anyone here ever limited, sort of like tried to limit eating on a ride, or like maybe you're like kind of close to home, so you're not going to open that bar because you want to like eat only half a bar and that's super annoying, so then you got to throw it away or you're like try to save it and it gets stale. And then you're trying to limit the ride on the home limit the eating on the ride, and then you come home and then maybe that night you're starving, like you're just like binging, like I cannot be satiated. If you find yourself starving at night like that, that is often a signal that you have under-eaten during your ride. That you are not replenishing the glycogen or the carbohydrates that you burned in the moment that you needed it most. And so now your body is going to get it some way or another, and that's going to hit you with very strong cravings. So my philosophy is, why not eat when your body needs it most, in the moment that it needs it? Cool. So I'll talk about this more in a few more slides, but glycogen, which is the stored form of carbohydrate in our liver and our muscles, it needs to be replenished. So if you're doing any sort of high intensity ride, or let's say it's a quote unquote easy ride, but you're doing a bunch of high intensity efforts here and there to like punch over that hill, you're going to be burning your glycogen stores. So you're going to be burning carbs. If you're doing a high intensity ride and you're not metabolically efficient, what that means is if you're not really trained up to burn and utilize fat as your primary fuel source in all these low intensity zones, then you have to replenish glycogen that you burn on the ride in order to sustain performance. So I'll talk about metabolic efficiency a little bit later. Mistake number 3, ignoring the demands and goals of the ride. So I think this is something that maybe very few people think about before they go out and ride, is like, wait, what is my goal of this ride? Like, what is my intention here? What am I trying to do? Even if you're a recreational cyclist, I do think it's still worth asking. Is it performance? You just want to hit all those PRs? Is it fat burning and endurance, and like you want to become really good at burning fat for fuel and maybe get lean? Is that the purpose of your ride? Is it high intensity execution? Like you just want to hit intervals really, really hard and well? Is it just simply, I want to have fun, but I also want to feel good throughout the entire ride to the end? Before you go ride, consider the demands of the ride. So think about, like, what route am I doing? Is it flat? Is it alpine dam? Is it rolling? You know, is it super hilly? Think about how long you're going out for. The intensity, you know, is it going to be easy paced? Are you going to be going for it? And then also you want to think about, what did I do in the days prior? Am I coming off a rest day and I'm like pretty fresh and well fed? Or am I 3 days into a training block or 3 days into riding and I might be a little bit in the hole, both calorically speaking and fatigue wise? So that should help dictate how you fuel yourself on that ride. So for example, a route, the harder the course, the more likely you'll need to rely on carbs to fuel the effort. When it comes to intensity, again, like I said, the higher intensity, the more reliance on carbohydrate. The easier the ride, the more your body is going to rely on its stored fat fuels to fuel the effort, which means less replenishment necessary. Okay, and like I said, if you're coming into the ride fatigued or off of a training block, your metabolism is likely going to be elevated, which is going to require increased caloric intake. There's something called afterburn, which means our metabolism can be elevated anywhere from 48 to 72 hours post-ride for a really hard ride. So that means your baseline is a lot higher. Okay, so I want to, before I go into my 3 sort of ride examples of how I would fuel for them, I want to give you guys just like a basic lesson on how our bodies use energy. And like I said, feel free to add questions into the chat. I will try to make this sort of as simplified as possible. The reason I'm asking this question, how do our bodies use energy, is because this will dictate how you should be fueling for your rides to really feel good and maximize adaptations. So as much as some people talk about, it's really just a simple equation of calories in, calories out. I really don't believe in that because there's all sorts of processes that happen that can upregulate or downregulate sort of upregulate or downregulate certain behaviors in our body. So depending on the intensity of the workout, among some other factors like fitness level, there will be a percentage of calories that you are burning that are coming from fat, which really don't require any replenishment because that's stored on our body, versus calories coming from carbohydrates, which you will need to replenish, but not necessarily all at once. We can only absorb, think about your last like really hard ride you did and think about, what did you eat? You know, okay, I had a Cliff Bar, I had a PBJ. Okay, that was like 400 calories. Maybe that was like 50 grams of carbohydrate. Like start to think about this kind of thing because we can only absorb 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour max. And that's if you have trained yourself to eat a lot on a ride. You're not just gonna be able to go out and do that without having serious gut upset. So if you can only absorb 90 grams of carbs per hour, you probably, if you're going out and doing a really high intensity ride, are going to be burning more than that. So like I said, it typically takes about 48 hours for glycogen repletion to take place. So for the glycogen to get all stocked up again. And the resynthesis of glycogen peaks in the 1 to 2 hours post-exercise. So you really do, if you come home and you're like, oh, I'm a little bit bonky, like that's the time to make some like sweet potato fries or like white rice, that's the time to have the carby thing so it can go right back into the muscles where you can utilize it again. The bad, like something that you don't want to do is wait till that night when you're starving and then eat all the carbohydrate and then go to sleep, where your body triggers fat storage because it's not utilizing those carbs in that moment. So you really want to do this immediately post-workout. And yeah. So if your Garmin says you burn 2,000 calories, but the majority of your ride was done in like zone 2 or this sort of fat burning chill pace, you do not therefore have to replenish 2,000 calories. So just because your Garmin tells you a number doesn't mean that the effort was 100% from stored carbohydrate and glycogen and therefore needs to be replenished. So you have to kind of think about, well, I was like an easy pace the whole time. Yes, I'm burning some carbohydrate, but the majority of these calories probably were coming from fat, which is stored on my body. So the concept of fat versus glycogen utilization. So there are two primary fuel sources for activity during exercise. There's fat, and then there's stored carbohydrate or glycogen. Protein is a little bit in there, the amino acids. If you have completely depleted your glycogen stores, protein or amino acids can fuel up to 10% of the effort. So it's really nominal. So that's why I'm focusing just on fat and glycogen. So fat, we really consider pretty much an infinite energy source. So it can account for anywhere from 30 to 100,000 calories of energy on the body. So I doubt anyone here is burning 100,000 calories during a ride without eating. Glycogen, on the other hand, is a very finite energy source. So we can store anywhere from 1,400 to 2,000 calories of glycogen on the body, and that's around 350 to 500 grams of carbs stored in our body at once. So that means, well, let me say, low to moderate intensity exercise, you can burn through that glycogen in 90 to 120 minutes. For high intensity exercise, you can burn through all of that in 20 minutes and hit depletion, which means you either hit a wall and you can't pedal anymore, or you need to replenish. So the harder you go, the more reliance on glycogen your body has. So fuel accordingly. If you slack on carb refueling during the workout, your performance will suffer. You will not be able to hit those same numbers and those same targets. And not only that, you will likely compromise the following day's performance as well, because now you're in the hole, you've used up all your glycogen, and now you're expecting your body to do it again the next day. It's not going to happen. So the other note is during high intensity rides, we can only replenish anywhere from 15 to 35% of the calories we burn during the ride. So even if you're doing an excellent job refueling, you're still not going to be able to replenish everything you've burned. So that is why it's important to be fat efficient, and also to continue refueling in the 24 to 48 hours post-ride. So when I say fat efficient, just a heads up, what I mean by that is that when you are at lower intensity efforts, your body is so good at pulling from the fat stores to fuel those low intensity efforts that it doesn't need to rely on carbohydrate. It can really reserve that carb until you absolutely are anaerobic and need the carbs. A really metabolically inefficient rider might be doing an hour of zone 2 easy riding, and they're burning through a lot of carbohydrate because they haven't trained their body to burn fat really well yet. One example, doing a lot of low intensity endurance rides helps you become more metabolically efficient and trains your body to burn fat more efficiently. We want to do this because we want to reserve and preserve those precious finite glycogen reserves for as long as possible before we have to dip into them. So if you go out and ride with someone and the end of the ride, they're just like on fire and unstoppable, and you're just like, I'm suffering, it's possible that they are more metabolically efficient than you, that they've sort of been in this easier zone where they're not dipping into those glycogen stores, and you have been slowly pulling from them the whole time. Okay, two sort of different styles or metabolic systems when it comes to exercise. Aerobic, So we have an aerobic or low intensity ride, for example. So the aerobic system, that's longer, low intensity efforts. You can sustain this for hours. You can say 4 words in a row talking in a sentence to a friend without having to take a breath. So this sort of aerobic energy system relies on fat for fuel. It requires oxygen. It requires pretty minimal carbohydrate consumption and can also promote fat loss because you're relying on burning fat for fuel. But you will still burn some glycogen during a quote unquote zone 2 endurance ride. So you still have to eat, like you will still be burning some calories that need to be replenished. So I would not suggest doing 3 or 4 hours completely fasted because there is still some energy that you're utilizing there. The other metabolic pathway is your anaerobic system. So this is like, or glycolytic we call it because it's splitting glucose molecule or glycogen. So this is like 10 to 90 second high intensity efforts or any efforts above that sort of threshold power or heart rate. You can maybe say 2 words at a time without having to take a breath. So that's a good guide. So with your anaerobic efforts, you rely primarily on your stored carbohydrate and glucose for fuel. So yeah, that could be like an interval ride or short, really hard, high intensity, or I would say group ride. You go into the anaerobic zone pretty frequently. Mountain biking, definitely cross. One note, I'm not getting too much into pre-workout fueling today because it's a whole other topic, but one thing I did want to mention is that your pre-workout meal actually does matter. So particularly if you are planning on trying to do a fat burning ride and an endurance building ride, the pre-workout meal will prompt the body to prioritize burning certain substrates over others. So a substrate is something like carbohydrate or fat. So for example, like our bodies are going to prioritize whatever's most readily available. So if you consume a really high carb meal before like an aerobic endurance ride, that will prompt the body to burn carbohydrate, and it will actually down regulate your body's ability to burn fat. So now your nutrition is actually compromised the goal of your ride and the adaptations you're hoping to achieve from that ride. So this can decrease, potential endurance gains and metabolic efficiency adaptations. Okay, this is the good stuff. Fueling for your specific workout. So I'm going to go through 3 examples of rides that you might partake in. One is going to be, so with these 3 rides, you're going to have 3 different fueling strategies. So the first is like an easy ride or maybe like a long endurance ride. So you're really kind of keeping it in those lower intensities. You can kind of go all day. You don't need to really do much to replenish. It's okay to eat more sort of complex or low to medium glycemic carbs. And there's really no need for simple sugars. Like do not throw that gel real far away. Like you do not need that on a low intensity ride. Maybe you have it in your saddlebag for like emergency situations, but you should not be having I would not suggest having anything like Stroop waffles or gels or gummies. That's just candy and it's really not serving you. Plus it might create a bit of like sugar addiction, sweet tooth in your regular diet, which is just not generally healthy in my opinion. So here's some examples. For men, well, this can be applied to women. You can begin the ride in a carb fasted state. Let's say it's a long, easy ride and you're like, I kind of want to lean up a little bit too. It's okay to start the ride. For men, you could potentially do fasted. I would say, think about carbohydrate fasting leading up to the ride. So maybe you have like yogurt with some nuts, but you don't have, a waffle and toast before like a long endurance fat burning ride. So kind of, you can drink maybe plain water for that first hour and a half. And then focus on whole foods to fuel that effort. So I like baked yams with salt, almond butter and jam on some low fiber bread. So like white bread or like sourdough or a baguette, homemade rice cakes, maybe a tortilla roll with cream cheese. Whole foods. Don't need any sort of straight up sugar sources. That's just gonna tweak your blood sugar. It's gonna sort of punch it up, like make it go up and down, and that you really don't need that for this kind of ride. We want it to be fat burning. Okay, number 2, specific workout, short, hard ride. This could be a short, hard race or whatever. Maybe it's like an hour and a half headlands, like going all out ballistic on a Tuesday. The goal of this ride might be you want to hit high power. You want to hit multiple accelerations. You want to finish strong. So in this case, even though maybe it's only an hour and a half, like I said before, you can burn through glycogen in 20 minutes of really high intensity. So you do want to replenish the glycogen with simple sugars and some high glycemic carbohydrates. So high glycemic means it's going to spike your blood sugar pretty quickly. Some examples, don't forget your drink mix has calories and carbohydrates. So this is one of my favorites, is to kind of use there's sugar in your Osmo, your scratch, right? And that's very easily assimilated, and you don't have to chew or anything. So it's nice when you can sort of count that towards your caloric needs and your simple sugar carbohydrate needs. So bring some electrolyte drink mix. I, again, am like really into whole foods. So dried dates are a good one. Figs. Again, you do have to train your body up to tolerate a lot of foods when doing hard exercise. So if it doesn't sit well the first time, don't necessarily give up. Just eat a little bit each time and see how it sits. You could do a flour tortilla with jam, gummies, like shot blocks is what I'm referring to. Oops. And then, sorry, my thing's covered. Oh yeah, gels if you really need that kick. Try to find something that is isotonic. So like Science and Sport makes an isotonic one. Something like, what is it, Cliff Shots, or what's the other one, the big one? I forgot. Whatever, the gross gels that have maltodextrin. Try not to do those because they really will dehydrate you. They're so carb loaded that your body is going to be pulling water out of the bloodstream, out of the water spaces in the body, and then back into your stomach to help digest and absorb it. So it's literally dehydrating you, which we know hydration, number 1. Okay, the third ride is like a long, hard ride, a race or group ride, a few hours or more, and you're really going for it for a sustained period of time. So that might include multiple accelerations, multiple threshold and anaerobic efforts, and you really want to finish strong. That's going to require a combination, right, of aerobic and anaerobic work. So for sure, you'll be burning through those glycogen stores. So it's imperative to refuel with calorically dense, medium and high glycemic carbs if you want to finish strong. Okay. And again, similar to hydration, you don't wait until you're starving to eat. You are already, if you really, the goal is performance and you want to do well, you're already starting to like chomp a little bit, like 20 minutes in perhaps, just having little bites. And again, the gut is sensitive. There's not much blood going there when you're exercising. So you want to eat just little bites at a time to really allow for best absorption. This is like a simple calculator that I use for really hard or high intensity efforts. And it tends to be like relatively on point. You could of course do a metabolic test, which we actually offered, to really understand like how many carbs am I burning at threshold power for 1 hour or for 20 minutes. You can really dial it in with a metabolic test, but this general guideline does tend to work for people. So you want to consume 1 gram of carb per kilogram of body weight per hour of like racing or high intensity exercise. So a 75 kilo rider needs to be eating, 75 grams of carbohydrate per hour, at least. Some examples. My sort of general rule of thumb, if you are doing like one of these hard group rides or longer hard efforts, start with the whole foods early in the ride and then finish the ride with more simple sugar foods. So I might do like a PBJ, rice cakes, tortilla wraps, a pro bar, picky bar if you're into bars. I prefer the whole food thing, but that's, you know, when you're doing really high intensity, maybe you only have a bar. And then transition toward the end of the ride. If you're feeling a little bit flat, that's when you do want to kick in with the simple sugars like dried dates, gummies, or gels. And then of course, ample fluids and electrolytes. This picture on the right, just for informative purposes. So this is all food that one of my athletes made, and they did essentially a 24-hour self-initiated challenge crossing the Alps in under 24 hours, which is the current record, right? So this person did not eat a single bar or a single gel during 24 hours of riding at altitude, climbing thousands of meters, right? And so it can be done. And he really was diligent about whole foods and had no gut problems. So I just want to use that as an example that it can be done to have whole foods to power your efforts and your rides. This is just a basic breakdown of sort of how many calories and grams of carbs are in certain things. So like a pro bar has 51 grams of carbs. So if you're a 75-gram rider, you maybe mix a pro bar with a Osmo, like bottle of Osmo every hour, and that is hitting that sort of 75 grams of carb per hour goal, right? Oh, goo, that was, so like goo gels are high carb, right? But there's maltodextrin, and they are so dense that they do pull water away from your body to help process and digest it. So it does tend to cause a lot of digestive issues. And if you've ever had those on the bike, it sucks. So to wrap up, general guidelines, generally speaking, pre and during ride nutrition, keep it low fiber and low in saturated fat. So you don't want to, I mean, I don't know if you've ever eaten vegetables before a ride, but I often do that on accident because I just have a very high vegetable diet, and it's like the worst. Fiber sucks really bad. So it just feels terrible. So keep it low fiber during the ride. That's not the time to be eating that, but it does mean that your meals outside of cycling do need to be like ramp up in the fruits and veggies. Low in fat, particularly saturated fat. You definitely pre-ride and also during ride, that releases slows the release of glucose. So if it's too high in saturated fat, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, because those carbs aren't going to be released now for perhaps until after your ride, when you don't really need them anymore. Moderate protein, that also slows the release of glucose, but in a positive way, so you don't have huge spikes and drops. Our gut does tend to do best on a combination of like a little protein, a little fat, and carbs. So if you're kind of breaking it into those three groups, it's easier on the gut to digest versus like only hitting your gut with carbs. And then this is a little more nuanced, but mixing sugar types. So you want to have glucose, fructose, and sucrose. So there's maybe sucrose in your drink mix. There's some fructose and glucose in your honey. If you're eating fruit, that's going to be primarily fructose, which you want to like limit a little bit, because fructose does tend to cause a lot of gut issues when it comes to exercise. But our body does replenish glycogen best in a combination of sugars. So in conclusion, put it into practice. I think keeping a log of what you're eating during your workouts can be really helpful, because if you go out one day and you're like, oh my God, I felt unstoppable. Well, think about what were you fueling with and how much were you drinking? So keep track of what you eat and how much you eat during rides and the timing of it. Note what makes you feel good and what doesn't. Test your fueling strategies during hard training rides and group rides, right? Like if you're working super hard, it's going to be harder to digest food. So you do need to train the gut. Practice eating and drinking at speed. Mix and match foods to dial in your fueling and hydration plan. And then of course, like as usual, plan ahead. So yeah, the best nutritional choices occur when you plan ahead and show up prepared to your rides and races. And that's it. And you can visit Achieve's website if you're thinking about coaching. And if you want nutrition, you can visit my website, coachsofi.com, or email me if you have questions that come up that you maybe forget to ask during today's session. Okay, now it is time for Q&A. Ryan, anything to say?
Well, I was just going to say that was awesome. Thank you.
Thank
We've
you.
got, quite a few questions. I can read them off for you if you want. Or if you
Yeah,
can.
how do I stop sharing? Okay,
There you go.
I think that worked.
The first one was for me. I don't know where I got this, but for some reason, we kind of just stick with whatever we've been told over the years. I always start with one bottle of regular water and one kind of just no matter what workout I'm doing, and then one bottle of Scratch or Osmo or whatever. Is that should we be going just like immediately to electrolytes if we're doing a harder ride, or what do you think?
Are you coming into the ride like really well hydrated?
Yeah. Let's assume that like you're doing okay. I mean, if it's
Yeah.
I guess in a race, maybe I would go straight to electrolytes.
Yes, 100%. I mean, really, if you're doing the plain water and the electrolyte drink mix, you are diluting a bit. That said, as a cyclist and bike racer, it's really nice to have plain water. Like, it's kind of gross when you're just having sugar on the tongue all the time. So I wouldn't necessarily do one per hour, but I personally do like to have a bottle of plain water on the bike, because otherwise I might not actually even drink as much. If my only choice is electrolyte fluids, I might drink a little less, but if I have plain water, I'm more likely to drink a little more. So in that sense, it's actually more practical to bring both. So no, functionally speaking, water and electrolyte doesn't make sense, but practically speaking, I think it does as a rider.
I guess, like, and to back off that just a little bit, like I'm like a typical weekend ride, I'm going out to Point Reyes and I'm stopping and I'm getting a coffee and I don't want to carry drink mix the whole time. Is there something that's, I don't think a lot of those drinks have like as much salt in them. Like if you're getting like a sparkling lemonade or something like that, you want to get some sugar into your water without just having plain water. Is there something that is there a specific type of beverage that besides,
Oh, like if you're like stopping at a corner store in the middle of the ride? Yeah. So I've done, like, what I'll do is I'll like grab like a vitamin water and cut it with half water.
I've done
or
that.
like I've done Gatorade and just cut it with half water. And that's like if you want a cold drink, that's a nice solution. And if you want to like DIY your own drink mix, or maybe there's not even, I don't know, maybe it's just a restaurant and no corner store, just pinch of salt in water, plain water. Like that'll do the trick, Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move on to John's question. He says, what's your take on salt stick caps, buffered electrosalts with 30 milligrams of caffeine?
Is this the salt stick caps? John, where are you? Can you clarify?
Yeah, it is. It's the salt stick. No. It's like a capsule. It's just a simple capsule instead of an electrolyte drink, just taking it as tablets. I've been playing around with them. I like that little boost of caffeine, and I'm just trying to, I don't know if there's any difference in eating it versus drinking it and trying to regulate the pace or the cadence with which you take it.
Yeah. This, that's a great question, right? Because there's little tablets you can take of like electrolyte tablet. To me, I don't get it, because the whole point of the electrolytes is to help transport. First of all, the primary electrolyte we're losing actually is salt. Okay. That's 90% of what we're losing when we're exercising. So why the salt though? Also because it helps hydrate us. And so if you're not taking it with fluid, like, to me, it's like, why separate it? The whole point is to get more fluid absorption into the body. So it misses the mark, the tab, for me. I would much rather you be hydrating. The same goes for, like, triathletes might do like salt stick, like licking salts. And it doesn't make any sense, because now you're becoming too salty with not enough hydration.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So a mix is going to be a better option.
I do like the caffeine though. That's a separate topic. The caffeine's great if you need a kick. Also, if you want, reduction in pain perception or increase fat burning, caffeine's amazing.
Yeah. Can you spend a second on that? That sort of, I'd almost call it microdosing, just kind of 30 to 50 milligrams intermittently. Or I've also heard of people waiting till later in the ride and then hitting it really hard to try to push through.
Yeah, I saw one study, really, it was saying, really with the caffeine, it's the most effective use of it is truly 30 minutes before your event. It's not actually the during. That said, from like practical experience, if you have a gel, which is straight sugar, and then some caffeine in it with 30 minutes left in your event or an hour to go, God, it's like a lifesaver. So in terms of like the sort of fat burning aspect of it, that's more of the 30-minute before your ride. I would not be just hitting yourself with caffeine the entire event. That could be a little bit detrimental in its own right. Also, we become, you don't want to become desensitized either to caffeine. Like, you want it to still have that impact on you.
Great. Thank you for the feedback.
Yeah. What's next?
So the next question is, should intermittent fasting be combined with cycling?
Is this a man asking? Male person? Okay. No. Sorry. I really can't stand intermittent fasting at all. Okay, first of all, if you're a woman, like, absolutely not. Nope. Does not work with our hormones. It makes us store more fat. Bad news all around. Intermittent fasting, as an athlete, I understand giving your body breaks for sort of like giving your digestive tract break, but to me, Kevin, why, I guess, what are you trying to get out of intermittent fasting? I think that's what I need to ask.
So I think from my point of view, trying to lose some fat and just becoming more fat efficient. But I'll be honest, I'm vain. I gained like 10 pounds over COVID. And so
that's okay.
I want to lose some weight.
Okay. First of all, talk to me, send me an email. Second of all, if you want to lose some weight and you want to be fat efficient, the intermittent fasting, what might end up happening and is likely to end up happening is that you are putting your body into starvation mode. And then finally you eat. I'm fat too. Finally you eat and your body's like, oh my God, I'm starving. Store it as fat. I don't know when this human is going to feed me again. So you're actually training your body to store more fat. As men, yes, it is true. If you do like a morning fast before an exercise, before like riding, yes, that can kind of boost testosterone and that can boost fat burning for you. So if you would fast, I would say only like in the morning before a zone 2 sort of endurance fat burning specific ride, that can work for you as a man. Doesn't work for women, but it would work for you. So that's the only time I would do it. I would not do this sort of, if you want to keep your metabolic fire burning and burning more calories throughout the day, then you need to be feeding the body throughout the day. You don't want to go into huge spikes and huge, peaks and valleys. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, stop doing that.
Yeah, Sophie, I got to follow up on that because I do this a lot. Like, again, if I'm doing like an 80-mile zone 2 ride, I have a good breakfast and then I head out and then it's like, I'll go all the way to Point Reyes. So it's like between 2 and 2.5 hours before I eat because I just don't need it. And I know I'm going to have a sandwich or something there that, it's going to definitely replenish me. Am I missing out on any of that? Or is it just like, you're just kind of like rolling the dice as far as like, if I had efforts I wanted to do later in the day, maybe I've kind of like bounced back and forth a little too much, by like kind of not eating enough and then maybe eating too much.
Yeah. My first question to you is like, what is your breakfast?
Like a overnight oats, that kind of stuff, like a good high fiber, like protein meal.
Yeah. I think there's not something super problematic with what you're saying, because if you had just eaten, that'll kind of fuel you for a while for that ride. And you are trained up and you have been doing this a while. So you are someone who could probably last for 2 hours without needing to refuel. That said, if I were to tweak your strategy, I would say eat a carb fasted breakfast, like no carbs for your breakfast, and then start fueling a little bit earlier in the ride, like an hour and a half or 2 hours in. But I would do carb fasted for you, for sure.
That doesn't sound like fun, but okay.
Yogurt is maybe a good choice, or boiled egg.
I gotcha.
Okay, next question.
Should you limit your low carb drink mix for the low intensity endurance ride to miss the sugar spike?
Is it hot outside? Who asked this?
John.
Oh,
John.
I was just kind of confused between the advice on the doing the no sugar intake for the endurance, and then I just realized that there's sugar in those drinks. So I was just curious if you need to limit it or.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think if you really are going for fat burning, then I would go for, let's just pretend it's normal conditions. It's not really hot out. You're not at altitude. You're just in a moderate temperate climate. It's definitely under 80 degrees. I would go for like a salt electrolyte mix, like Noon, something without the sugar. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Should we stay away from whole grains on every ride? Did you ask? Who asked this?
That's
You did. Mr. Rapha?
Low fiber bread. So yeah, I guess like I make, I get like whole wheat bread or something from like Josie Baker.
Yeah. If your body can tolerate it, fine. If you're going for higher intensity, I would go for the low fiber bread because that's going to fuel you more quickly. If you're going out for 80 miles, it's going to be a long day and you can tolerate the wheat bread without getting like stomach upset. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Cool.
Trail mix. Oh, it's not from who I thought would have asked this trail mix question. We have some trail mix fans in the house. Okay, how about trail mix? Peanuts, raisins, M&Ms, dates, an alternative to Cliff Bars, and how much, like in, say, a Ziploc bag? How about a beer after on an easy, low endurance ride? Or is that a real no-no? Okay, trail mix, that's pretty hard to digest. Like, if you're really chilling out on this ride, sure, the raisins are simple sugar. That's like sugar. So that's okay. And then you're combining it with some nuts. Those are going to be a little bit harder. Like that's going to be a slower process to digestion. I personally don't feel great with like eating a lot of nuts on a ride, like makes my stomach hurt. I think it's a decent alternative to Cliff Bars. I might add a little bit of a grain in there, like a granola or like Rice Krispies. How much, that's really something I would use a tool like MyFitnessPal to determine calories in there. But again, you don't want to overwhelm your system with too much of one macronutrient. So you don't want it to be all this fat from the nuts, which is really not fueling too much of that effort. You need a little bit of carbohydrate there.
How is that different than like you were talking about PB&Js and stuff? So there's peanut butter in there.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah,
a tablespoon or two, like that's not too crazy. Like I think when it's in combination, if this had, like I said, like granola in it, something carby, then I think it'd be a nicer balance. Like that's why at PBJ, I like the simple sugar from the fruit. The peanut butter is a little bit of protein. And so on. And then, a beer. It's not great for hydration. I mean, I would double fist like a beer in one hand and then like a hydration drink in the other hand, personally. It almost makes more sense to drink beer after like a hard event because your body's like burning through all those carbs. Plus you'll be a cheap drunk. Yeah, I mean, alcohol's alcohol. Like you burn, like you can't store it. You burn right through it. But it's really bad for hydration. So, what's the next one? Oh, Crystal, do you want to read it?
There's, Crystal, sorry, I missed that one. In a 24-hour race, how much protein should a person have per hour?
Ooh, interesting. That's interesting because I'm like, how much carbs do you want per hour? I think I wouldn't say there's a set amount. I think you want some for sure because like I wouldn't do more than 15 grams an hour or 15 grams yeah, maybe an hour, because it's nice because it slows down the release of the glucose from the simple sugars you're eating. But it's kind of, to me, I'm sort of like, it's not quite the way I would ask that question. The way I would ask that question is sort of like, what should I be eating during a 24-hour race,
well,
right? Like,
ask this.
Yes.
Should a drink mix have protein then? Because we use Infinite and it has protein in it. I've learned that I can't do protein. It makes me sick. But for him, we're trying to get him for the race across America, and we're having issues with protein. So that's why we're asking this question, because we're really confused on his drink mix. He does really well, but then he starts having stomach issues and we get behind on nutrition.
Yes. Okay. And so how much protein is in this drink mix? Do you know off the top of your head?
4 grams per hour.
4. What else is in that drink mix? I'm very curious.
So we have a customizable one because he's on Team Infinite. But that's what we're questioning, because he was doing really well with races. And then
is it animal protein? What is it?
What is the protein? He's looking right now. But that's what we're curious, is like your take, do you actually need protein in mixes, or do you just
hold on, sorry, I'm putting you on speaker. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No, so in races, do you actually need protein or just very minimal protein? That's what we're trying to figure out what to do. And so what kind of protein is it? It doesn't actually say, does it?
Yeah, so it's going to be animal protein.
Animal protein.
Yeah, that's going to, use the colloquial term, that's going to fuck you up. For most people, it's like.
Well, and that's what I found for me, it does. So I don't use protein in my mixes.
So yeah, track your gut, right? So, you really don't need much. Like I said, if you've burned through all your glycogen and you are totally suffering, yeah, you're going to have about 10% of energy needs coming from amino acids. But I like the protein in the fueling, because you want a mix of macronutrients to help your gut absorb. I would try, I really, the philosophy is hydration in the bottle, food in the pocket. Okay. Really is, that might not be in line with the, philosophy of Infinite, but low cal hydration. I don't want, like, protein in the drink. There are some carbohydrate drink mixes that I can get behind for like some really hard events, but that's like when you have really mastered understanding how to hydrate and fuel, then you maybe go to that route. But you have to master the basics first.
Well, and that's what we thought we had it, but now it changed. And so we actually took protein out and have been trying it, but we've had issues staying hydrated with extra salt consumption. And so that's what we're trying to figure out, is that fine balance of, being able to ride something like a race across America that's going to need food for 11 days. And so that's why we're in here listening, trying to get more ideas on, is the pre-races before, trying to figure out that perfect balance.
Yeah. And just FYI, like Dr. Alan Lim, who created Scratch, he has kind of created this, he hasn't released it, but he's created this, hydration beverage. Sorry. He has created this calculator to sort of assess salt losses, because everyone is individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not a lot is the answer.
and probably not in the drink.
Mix. Got it. Okay. That works. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're coming up on an hour, but I think we can get through all these questions if that's okay with you, Sophie. What do you think?
Do it.
Okay, so Matt says at home I'll drink maybe 4 to 6 SIS, sports and science, right? Is that what it's called? Or noon tabs a day at home, ride or no ride. Is this bad? I don't drink soda at all. Smiley.
Matt, my question, my homework for you is go look at the percent of daily value of salt that one noon tablet has. Because I think it's something like 50% of your daily salt intake. It's something crazy like that. So if you're not sweating, you're probably going to be a bit bloated. If you're not sweating and losing all this salt, you really should not be drinking. Like, get some sparkling, like nice sparkling waters, if you want that like nice thing. SIS, that is sugar. Well, I guess it depends which one you're drinking, but oh yeah, I think SIS is high carb. I can't remember, but I was really disappointed with their drink mix recently. Oh, maybe it was their recovery.
Yeah, anyway, the tabs are okay. They don't have any sugars in that, but there is 350 milligrams of sodium, so 14% daily value.
And you're having 4 to 6. a day.
Yes, that's true.
So 400% or 300%.
Well, is there a reason why? Like, is this for, why drink it on an off day, I guess? Is it just
it's just like a flavor thing, really. It's 14%, by the way. So 4 of those is not 1,400%, but.
Oh, it's 14, not
Yeah.
40.
No,
Okay,
14,
cool.
yeah. I mean, it's still not great, but not terrible. So.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's like functional. It's not the worst thing you could be having if you don't drink soda. But yeah, I mean, if you have blood pressure problems, like you definitely don't want to be consuming that much salt if you're not sweating and losing the salt.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Get some Pellegrinos. Get a soda stream.
Okay, next question is a guy who has Peter has a peanut and nut allergy, and most bars have nuts. What do you recommend? Are electrolyte capsules okay to use? What about hammer Pt1, which is a mix of carb and protein and a bit of fat as a long distance fuel? It's a lot. Sorry.
Oh yeah. So Peter, great question. I think it's very frustrating for anyone who has nut allergies because almost all the foods out there have nuts in them or nut butters. It's very frustrating. So I don't know if you're vegan or not, but if you're not, I would, if you are down for it, make some homemade food. So do something like the rice cakes, like homemade rice cakes, sticky rice. That could be good with like some jam in it. Maybe you could put a little cream cheese in it if you want a little bit of protein. You could also do like, there's these little baked pasta balls you can make that have maybe a little cheese in it. That's not going to be overloading your body with saturated fat, but it's like nice, savory, has some protein, has some fat. That's what I would recommend. It is very frustrating with the bars though, for sure. It's all nut based. Electrolyte capsule, we talked about that. I say ditch it and go for functional hydration. Hammer Perpetuum, again, I'm not into it because we tend to dehydrate when we are drinking these high carb drink mixes. Also, it does have, I think, it has an animal protein in it, I think whey or something like that, and so that can cause a lot of digestive upset. But like I said, if you're a pro and you've been doing this a long time and you're really good at hydrating and you have a follow car or like you will have multiple fluid sources, okay, go for a high carb drink mix. But that's really, I think, an advanced nutrition strategy.
Okay,
sorry.
what I